The sea was whispering secrets that first night. The air was heavy with salt, and something unspoken between them. They had waited so long, too long, for this moment. Yet when his fingers brushed her wrist, she felt not warmth, but a flicker of cold, like the touch of a memory that wasn't hers. The villa hummed softly, with the electricity of anticipation and fear. Wasn't this supposed to be perfect? How could love feel both sacred and haunted? Her gaze lingered on his smile. Too practiced. Too calm. A storm was coming, she thought. But it wasn't outside. It was right here, beneath the candlelight, breathing through their vows. How could he know things she'd never told him? How could he whisper her childhood nickname before she even spoke it? And for the first time since saying, "I do," she wondered, was this still a honeymoon? Or the beginning of a confession? The morning after was almost too quiet. The waves crashed like whispers behind the walls. She made coffee, but the cup trembled in her hands. He spoke softly, but his words felt rehearsed, like lines read from memory. The honeymoon was supposed to be a dream, a promise of new beginnings. But each glance between them carried an echo of something unfinished. She tried to smile, yet every smile he gave her seemed meant for someone else. And when he touched her cheek, she wondered if his hand remembered another face. He led her down to the cliffs that afternoon, the air thick with the scent of lemon groves and rain. She laughed at first, pretending to forget the strange unease of the night before, but when he reached for her hand, she noticed a tremor. He seemed lost, searching the sea for something invisible. She followed his gaze. Nothing but water and sky. Yet when he whispered her name, it wasn't hers. It sounded like a memory surfacing, soft and dangerous. That night she woke to the sound of footsteps. The villa's stone floor echoed with deliberate, heavy steps. She thought it was a dream until she heard his voice, soft, pleading, murmuring a name she didn't know. The balcony doors were open, curtains billowing like ghosts. She approached, barefoot, heartbeat in her throat. Outside, he stood alone, facing the sea, whispering to the dark. In the morning, she confronted him gently, pretending calm. He smiled, denying everything, claiming she must have dreamed. But dreams didn't leave footprints on marble floors. His denial felt rehearsed, too precise, as if built over years of practice. She looked into his eyes and saw both tenderness and terror. He reached for her hand, but she withdrew. She wasn't sure who she was to him anymore. A wife, a ghost, or a mistake, resurrected by love. The night clung to her skin like damp silk. Sleep refused to come. Each breath of the sea felt heavier, as if carrying someone else's sorrow. Ethan stirred beside her, muttering words that made no sense. Fragments of a life she didn't know. She turned on the lamp. His face was calm, yet his lips trembled with names she'd never heard. She wanted to wake him, but fear held her still. What if he wasn't dreaming? What if he was remembering? She followed him one night when he rose from bed without a sound. His steps were slow, deliberate, as if led by something unseen. He opened the balcony doors, stood before the storm, and whispered again, "Sophia." The name sliced through her like cold wind. The sea below responded with a violent crash, echoing a pain she didn't understand. Was this grief or madness? Or something that blurred the line between both? Morning came, but the sunlight only sharpened the edges of unease. Ethan sat at the table, silent, eyes fixed on the sea beyond the terrace. When she asked who Sophia was, he froze. His cup tipped, coffee bleeding across the linen like a dark secret spilled. He smiled then too calmly and said he didn't know anyone by that name. But his voice trembled, betraying. For the first time she realized his silence wasn't emptiness. It was defense. Lucia noticed before Clara said a word. "He walks at night," she whispered while polishing the silver. "You should lock the doors." Her tone carried both pity and warning. That evening, Clara sat alone in the villa's study. surrounded by half-packed luggage and unanswered questions. Outside, thunder crawled across the sea. A photograph lay on the desk, Ethan's, taken years before. In the corner of the frame, another face barely visible. Her face, or someone who looked just like her. That night, she dreamt of drowning. A hand, warm, familiar, pulled her beneath the surface, not to kill her, but to make her remember. When she awoke, Ethan was gone again. She rushed to the balcony. He stood there, rain drenching him, whispering apologies to the dark. When she called his name, he turned, eyes empty, voice trembling, and asked, "Sophia?" The sea roared louder as if answering him. The morning air carried the scent of wet stone and salt. Clara couldn't shake the image of Ethan standing in the rain, calling her another woman's name. While he slept, she searched the villa. Every drawer, every hidden corner. Inside a leather-bound journal, she found letters written in a language she couldn't read, but recognized by the handwriting. Ethan's. The dates stretched back 5 years, each one signed the same way. Per semper tua, Sophia. Her heart pounded, not in betrayal, but in terror. How long had she been living someone else's life? Lucia's silence finally broke over breakfast. "The sea keeps its memories," she said quietly. "It never forgets who it takes." Clara's spoon froze midair. The older woman told her about the girl who drowned 5 years ago. Sophia, a guest in this same villa. Her body was never found, but her name was whispered whenever storms came. Lucia swore Ethan returned each year, staying in the same room, staring at the same horizon. Clara realized this honeymoon wasn't new. It was repetition. Driven by dread and curiosity, Clara walked into town. The locals' eyes followed her, some with pity, others with fear. At the small municipal archive, she found what she didn't want to see. An article, yellowed and fragile, about a woman named Sophia Del Mar, age 27, who drowned off the Amalfi Cliffs. The photo beside the article mirrored her face perfectly. Every feature, every line. It wasn't resemblance, it was replication. Her knees gave out, the paper trembling in her hands as if alive. That evening, she confronted Ethan. The sound of rain against the windows seemed to echo her pulse. "Who is she?" she whispered. His expression flickered between shock and guilt. He tried to speak, but the truth sat heavy in the room like a ghost. "You wouldn't understand," he said, voice trembling. "It wasn't supposed to be you." The words shattered something fragile inside her. He reached for her, but she stepped back, trembling as thunder split the sky. Sleep never came. The storm raged until dawn, and when it finally broke, the villa seemed hollow. Clara wandered to the cliffs, her mind echoing with Lucia's warning and Ethan's confession. She stood at the edge, the wind howling around her, staring at the gray horizon. Beneath her feet, the sea churned endlessly, angry, hungry, alive. Somewhere deep below, she imagined Sophia still calling, and in that sound she began to wonder if she had ever truly been herself at all. Ethan didn't sleep anymore. He sat by the window every night, staring out at the sea, like a man waiting for judgment. Clara watched him, the distance between them filled with unspoken words. When she finally asked what he was looking for, he whispered, "Forgiveness." The word felt foreign on his tongue, cracked and brittle. His eyes glistened with something close to confession, but fear held it back. She realized that love could coexist with terror and still be called love. The next afternoon, Lucia found Clara on the beach, barefoot, sifting through driftwood and fragments of glass. The older woman's voice was careful, hesitant, as she told her the truth. Sophia's death was no accident. She had been seen arguing with Ethan hours before she disappeared. The police called it an accident, but Lucia had seen the bruise on Sophia's neck. Clara's breath caught. Her heart refused to beat. Love and fear fused into one unbearable thing. That evening, Ethan broke his silence. He confessed he had loved Sophia. But their love had been poisoned by jealousy and fear. "She wanted to leave," he said, voice breaking. "I tried to stop her. I didn't mean..." The rest dissolved into sobs. Clara sat motionless, staring at him as if at a stranger. The man she had married was fading, replaced by the one who had once stood at the edge of madness. Outside, the tide surged, as though the ocean itself listened. The storm came that night, violent and unrelenting. Lightning fractured the sky. Waves battered the cliffs. Ethan ran outside, shouting Sophia's name into the wind. Clara followed, desperate, terrified he might vanish as she finally understood. He wasn't haunted by Sophia's death. He was calling her back. The sea roared louder, thunder shaking the villa's bones. In that chaos, love and guilt became indistinguishable. When dawn came, the storm was gone, but Ethan was not. His footsteps led down to the rocks below, ending at the water's edge. Clara searched until her voice broke, but only silence answered. Lucia found her kneeling on the shore, clutching Ethan's watch. Its glass cracked. The hands stopped at midnight. She looked out over the endless blue and whispered, "He finally found her." But part of her feared he had simply returned to where his guilt belonged. The villa stood silent after Ethan's disappearance, as though the walls themselves were grieving. Clara moved through its corridors like a ghost, her footsteps muffled by memory. She found herself drawn to his study again and again, unable to let go. Among his papers, she discovered a letter, addressed to no one, written in Ethan's unmistakable hand. It spoke of guilt, rebirth, and a miracle that should never have been. The words made no sense until she noticed the final line. They said her heart could live again. Lucia took her to the village doctor, an old man who had known Ethan since childhood. His eyes softened when Clara spoke Ethan's name. When she told him about the letter, he grew pale and silent. "There was a transplant," he finally said. "A young woman's heart, 5 years ago." Sophia's the room tilted. Clara's breath vanished. The world she thought she knew cracked like fragile glass. In that moment, she understood why Ethan had looked at her the way he did. Because part of Sophia truly lived within her. That night, Clara stood before the mirror, her pulse thundering beneath her ribs. Every heartbeat felt like an echo not entirely her own. The candle's flame flickered, and for an instant she saw another woman's reflection, so similar yet subtly different. Sophia's eyes stared back. Her lips curved into a faint, mournful smile. Clara's breath hitched. The reflection didn't mimic her movement. It lingered a second too long, as if waiting for her to understand. Lucia found her the next morning, staring out to sea, eyes hollow but calm. Clara told her everything. The letter, the heart, the reflection. Lucia listened in silence, then whispered, "Sometimes the soul finds its way back through the body it once loved." Clara laughed softly. The sound brittle, almost broken. She understood now that Ethan hadn't just seen Sophia in her. He had felt her heartbeat through Clara's chest, the living ghost of a love he couldn't let die. That evening, Clara returned to the cliffs where everything began. She placed Ethan's watch and the letter inside a glass jar, sealing them with trembling fingers before setting them into the tide. "He loved you," she whispered, "to Sophia, to Ethan, to herself." The waves carried the jar away, glittering under the dying light. She felt her heartbeat steady, no longer divided between past and present. The sea no longer frightened her. For the first time, she felt whole, even in loss. The nights grew colder. Though the villa stood empty, Clara began to sense movement. Footsteps where there should be silence, whispers where the wind should have been. One evening, she woke to find the balcony doors open again, the curtains billowing inward. On the floor lay Ethan's watch, still damp, ticking once more. A faint voice called her name, not in the room but inside her mind. Her pulse quickened. Love, grief, and fear folded into one unbearable truth. He hadn't left. She could no longer tell whether she was dreaming or awake. Each time she blinked, Ethan appeared somewhere new. By the window, in the hallway mirror, his eyes soft, pleading. "I never wanted you to bear my sin," he murmured, "but I couldn't let her go." Clara's tears fell freely. "You loved her more than me," she whispered. He shook his head. "I loved you because you carried her heart." His voice trembled like the sea before a storm. At dawn, Clara stood by the cliffs again. The wind tore through her hair as she faced the sea, waiting for him to appear. And he did, not as shadow, but as memory made flesh, eyes full of sorrow. "You must let me go," he said, stepping closer, "or neither of us will ever rest." She reached for him, fingers brushing air colder than winter. For a heartbeat, she felt his warmth, then only mist, dissolving in sunlight. Lucia found her near the cliffs that afternoon, pale but calm. "He's gone," Clara said softly. "Not lost, just released." The older woman wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, eyes glistening. "Sometimes love is a haunting that needs mercy." They stood together in silence, watching the sea reclaim what it had once taken. For the first time, Clara didn't feel afraid of the water. She felt grateful for its depth, its memory, and its forgiveness. That night, Clara lit a single candle by the window. She placed her hand over her heart and whispered a quiet prayer. For Ethan, for Sophia, for herself. The candle's flames swayed gently, as though answering her. In its glow, she caught one last glimpse of his reflection smiling faintly. Finally at peace, the wind sighed through the open window, carrying away the last of his voice. Love hadn't died. It had simply changed shape. Weeks passed, yet time felt suspended, like waves forever curling but never breaking. Clara lingered in the villa, unable to leave the place where love had both bloomed and burned. Each morning she sat by the window, sketching the sea as if tracing the heartbeat she once shared. Sometimes she still felt Ethan's presence, not haunting, but guiding, soft as breath. The silence no longer frightened her. It felt like companionship in another form. Lucia came to visit one last time. She brought a small wooden box wrapped in blue silk. "He left this for you," she said softly. Inside lay a photograph, Ethan and Sophia, smiling on the same cliffs years ago. On the back, in Ethan's handwriting, were the words, "She brought you back to me, so I could finally say goodbye." Clara pressed the photo to her heart. The weight of sorrow lifted slightly, replaced by something purer. Gratitude. That night, Clara walked to the shore where the waves whispered stories of the dead. She carried the photograph and the last remnants of Ethan's belongings. The tide was calm, the air sweet with jasmine. Kneeling, she whispered both their names, Ethan and Sophia, and set the photograph adrift. The sea accepted it gently, as if aware of its meaning. In that act, she felt something release within her, a final thread snapping softly in her chest. At dawn, she began to pack her things. The villa no longer felt like a tomb, but a memory carved into stone. She paused by the mirror one last time. Her reflection was her own again. No flicker, no shadow, only peace. "Goodbye," she whispered, not to the past, but to the version of herself that had lived inside it. As she closed the door, sunlight spilled across the floor, erasing the last trace of darkness. When Clara finally left the Amalfi coast, the sea was calm, a sheet of mirrored glass. She looked back only once and saw the villa standing proud against the cliffs, unchanged, yet somehow smaller. The train moved forward, carrying her toward an uncertain but honest life. She touched her chest where her heart beat. Sophia's heart, her heart, and smiled. Love hadn't ended. It had transformed. And though the sea kept its secrets, it also gave her back her soul.